Hello and happy Friday, and thanks for tuning in to RadioFreeRhinecliff.org and this show in particular. Correcting me if I'm Norm. I'm your host, Norm, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight with Jeanne Fleming. Thank you, Jeanne, for being here.
I'm happy to be here.
Happy Friday. Now, you've got something coming up in the near future. What is it called? It's something Sinter...
Oh, yeah. Sinterklass.
Yeah.
It took me years to learn how to say it.
Yeah, but I hear all kinds of different pronunciations. Lots of people say Sinterklaas or Sinterklaas.
Incorrect.
Yeah.
It's Sinterklaas.
Sinterklaas.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yes. I learned that from a Dutch person, personally.
A Dutch person, perfectly. And were they sort of masters of like Dutch pronunciation, or?
Well, they were Dutch, so I have to assume that, that they were.
And right, they don't pronounce it differently, sort of in South Holland or versus
not
North.
Not that I heard of, not that I know of. No.
Yeah.
What would that be like?
I don't know, but you go to the south of the U.S., people pronounce things differently.
Totally differently. I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that.
I'm glad I could get right off on a ridiculous tangent. And how long have you tell the listeners if they don't know what that is?
What is Sinterklaas?
Sinterklaas.
Sinterklaas is kind of a marvelous act of community imagination where a whole group of people for a day and actually even longer than that engage in a story, and everyone plays a part in that story. And that's, I think, what I love about it is that it's a suspension of disbelief. It's a time out of time, but it's also a time where everyone participates. People don't just watch, they're a part of it.
Right. I love that. I hadn't thought of it like this before. I'd seen a bunch of them. And last year was a Grumpus, so I sort of was a part of the story.
Being a Grumpus is the most important thing. In fact, we decided before I came here today that the Grumpus is truly the board of directors, I think.
Oh, great. Sorry for you. But I hadn't thought of it as a story, as sort of a narrative. Do you think of it that way?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's a story that I more or less made up almost 40 years ago. Because what happened was I was asked to create an event for the town of Rhinebeck. At that time, or around that time, I was doing the Statue of Liberty celebration for New York City. And the craft fair, the famous craft fair that was in Rhinebeck, had left Rhinebeck. And people were saying, well, no one's going to remember Rhinebeck. Would you make an event for us? So I got together a whole lot of people, kids, families, all the church leaders, the community leaders, had a big meeting of 100 people.
Wow.
And I put up 3 giant pieces of paper, and I said, okay, what is it? What's it for? Who's it for? When should it happen? And what's it about?
Right.
And everyone in the group of 100 yelled out things, and we wrote all of them down. And at the end of the night, you got to vote on what you wanted it to be. And you could vote as many times as you wanted, and we tallied it up. And at the end of the night, it came out that they wanted to do something with the Dutch heritage for children around the holiday. Now, nobody knew about Sinterklaas at that time.
Right.
So I went out to do research to see what might be happening in Holland around that time. And literally within 24 hours, I found Sinterklaas.
Right.
And I thought, this is perfect in so many ways. It was non-denominational. It was the history. It was for children. It wasn't Christmas. It wasn't at Christmas. And I thought, this could be really, really wonderful. But then I started working with the story, and there were things about the story I didn't like.
Right.
And I began changing the story and writing the story for our town, the story that we were all going to enact together. And there were a lot of changes that I made almost immediately. And then over the course of these many years that we've done it, it's changed, over those years as well. But going into all those changes is a little complicated.
I was going to ask, well, what are some of the biggest changes that happened? What are some of the things when you looked at it right away, you're like, no, we can't have that?
Well, one of the things that I didn't like about it is that it's a time when children are judged. There was a character who judged children, who carried them off in a black bag, taking them back to Spain. There was good children, bad children, that kind of thing. And I decided right off the bat that the children are our future. And this time of year, when you go into the darkest time of the year, the reason we look to the Christ child and children at this time is because they're the light. They're what's coming.
Right.
And I thought it's not a time to be judging children. It's a time to be honoring the children.
Right.
So immediately I took that out, but I thought immediately of the crowns and branches. So the children, instead of being judged and punished, the children were made the kings and
smacked
queens
with a branch or whatever.
And smacked with a branch.
Right.
So what I did was I took that branch and I turned it into a royal scepter. And I decided that they should make crowns. So the children immediately were making their own crowns and branches that were their royal scepters and their crowns. But I also felt that this season is so much about having and wanting instead of about what it truly should be about at this time of year. So I explained to the community, and there were a number of meetings after that where I began to tell the story, and that's how it began. I just started having meetings at the Beekman Arms, and hundreds of people would show up, and I would tell the story as I was creating it and see how people reacted to it. So part of what happened is that if the children are going to be honored as kings and queens, it was very important to me that they understood that with that kind of honoring comes responsibility.
Right.
So almost immediately thereafter, I created the Wish Ladies. And what the Wish Ladies do is they ask the children to make 3 wishes. One for their world, one for their community, and one for their family. And that causes the attention to be taken off the child as I want this, I want that.
Right.
And makes it, what do I want for the world? What do I want for my family? They have to think beyond themselves. And so that became a really crucial part of Sinterklass, is that the children made wishes for things beyond themselves. And that became very quickly one of the most moving parts of Sinterklaas, because the Wish Ladies learned so much about what was going on in the community, what the children wished for, what was going on in their family.
The children tell the Wish Ladies what their wishes are?
The children tell the Wish Ladies, because so many of the children are little, they can't write. And those wishes, when the Wish Ladies would write them down, would be tied into their branches. So at the same time that they're being kings and queens with royal scepters, already the branches have these wishes and these responsibilities in them.
And does anybody keep track of what those wishes are?
Mm-hmm.
And do you have all of those for 20 years? It'd be very interesting to see how those wishes have changed over the decades.
Those wishes have changed a lot.
Oh, my goodness.
And one of the things that became really, really interesting was when things changed between when I did it for 8 years, and then we stopped for a number of years because my son got very sick and I couldn't do both things at the same time. And when we came back, the community had changed. And one of the most surprising things was children didn't know what a wish was. They didn't know how to wish for something like for their community. And the Wish Ladies suddenly had to become the people who explained to children what it was to wish for something beyond that Xbox or iPad or whatever it was they wanted.
Okay, what years were you away? What year did you come back?
I guess I started it in 1984, I think. I can't remember. And I did it for 8 years.
So in like 92 or so, you went away for 6 years? Is that what you said?
Something like that. Yeah.
So around 98, 2000.
And around that time, people started, I couldn't come into town without people asking me, would you do, that's another change. So in the old days, it was called Old Dutch Christmas in Rhinebeck, because people felt Sinterklaas was a weird foreign word and nobody would know what it was.
Right.
So we called it Old Dutch Christmas in Rhinebeck. By the time I brought it back, you couldn't use the word Christmas anymore.
Right.
Because things had changed so much in the community.
But also, you said in its origins in Holland that it was a non-denominational
Exactly.
sort of thing.
And Christmas confused that issue.
That's too bad.
So when we brought it back, I was able to call it Sinterklass, and people Googled it. And so that was a big difference. Suddenly there was the internet, and people could Google things, and they could find out about these things.
I Googled it.
So the time of bringing it back, I was bringing it back to a much more informed audience.
Right.
And that caused other kinds of changes and questions to come up.
One, I think I'm going to lead into one of those questions now. I Googled it, and I found that like just a couple of years ago in Holland, they stopped having this guy, Black Peter, in blackface. That the people were like, you can't do that. That's
Anymore.
not okay.
Yeah. Well, we never did it. I took the Black Peter out instantly.
Yeah. So somehow years ago, you saw that as problematic.
I saw it as problematic right from the beginning, but what I really saw was a much older tradition of the wild man, of the man who comes out of the woods.
Right.
Because one of the things that happened in Sinterklaas as a historical festival was it was celebrated in the countryside. But as Holland became more urbanized, the celebration moved into the city. And so these characters, which are ancient characters from myth and story, Odin and his white horse, he's Sinterklaas. He was there before the good saints Nicholas ever existed. So were the wild men, and they were the men of the wood, the wild men. And so I turned him immediately into the wild men from the very beginning. We never had Black Peters. And then, of course, as time proceeded, it became a political issue that had to be dealt with, and that I've dealt with in many, many different ways. I mean, I've been interviewed about the Black Peter by the New York Times, by Time Magazine, by all the Dutch newspapers.
Right.
Because they looked to Sinterklaas as a very interesting, how we had changed that tradition almost immediately.
Right. So did you study, I saw you studied medieval studies at Bard.
Yes. Where did you read that?
Somewhere online. I got 8 pages of notes.
It's a long time
the internet. Yeah, but that seems like it could sort of lead into this kind of thing in storytelling and rituals and group rituals. What's the phrase? The processional arts.
Processional arts. That's another story that comes even later. But no, I was a medieval studies major. And one of the things that really interested me, but this has to do with how I started doing theater and all of that, but I was a medieval studies major. And one of the things I loved about the Middle Age period is that communities would come together to enact plays, stories. That was the way people came together. And it wasn't about artists. It was about everybody in the community. The blacksmith, the person who made bread. Everybody was a part of whatever that pageant or whatever that story was that they were going to enact. And so that fascinated me too, because at the real heart of my work and why I do the work that I do is I really believe that when you create art, it literally changes not only your psyche, but almost your physical being. You forget time. You go into a different space. You begin to create. Your heart opens. You forget everything that's going on around you. And I really believe that when you go into that space, it creates a kind of love and a kind of openness. And what I was interested in was not so much artists who already know this and who do it, but allowing other people, regular people, the opportunity to create so that they could have that feeling, and that in some funny way that would create peace in the world. Because if people connect with their hearts and they connect with their creativity, they can no longer hate, and they can no longer be mean to each other. They can no longer criticize in the same way, because they've reached a spiritual place that allows them to see beyond the individual and tribalism and that kind of thing. So that's why I do my work.
Okay, that is so gorgeous. That is so beautiful. Thank you. I love that idea. Sorry, go on.
Well, what's beautiful about Sinterklaas is that I get to see that happening with the children. So I'm starting with young children who are making things that are going to create characters for them that they are then going to play out, that teach them a lot about living in community, living in the world. And this year, the story is so much about that learning and growing up, because it's based on, sort of off of, though I've rewritten it, the story of Hansel and Gretel.
Okay.
Which is a story about kids growing up.
And so, I mean, but that seems sort of like the Sinterklass story, not just this year. Do you write different stories each year?
Oh, yes. Every year there's a new story. So that's the opportunity that the Honored Animal presents. Not only does it honor the native traditions that, were the beginning. So we begin the day with words before all else. We honor the native traditions. And in the pageant, we honor the native traditions right at the beginning. And then we honor all of the groups that have come in since then as the nation has changed. So that's why there are 18 different kinds of music that you hear during the day. That's why you see all different kinds of traditions, because it's about that big mix that becomes America.
Right.
But so the underpinning story that I write every year about the honored animal really comes out of the native tradition. And that's where I get to teach about spirit.
Okay. Nice.
Through that.
And just sort of any First Peoples tradition about porcupine, or just local, like with Sapasco stories?
I start with local and then move out into a larger framework. I've done myself a lot of work with Native Americans. In 1985, I did a project with what would have been the local Indians here now. They're now up in Akwesasne, but with the children, where we renegotiated the sale of the land for the town of Rhinebeck with the children of today, with children from Akwesasne, and we renegotiated that contract.
Okay, I love that so much. And what did the renegotiated contract look like?
It looked like the children all being together to promise to take care of this land together that we occupy.
Right, but
from the river to the town to its forests to.
Did it still include the idea of land ownership?
No, it explored the notion of the gift.
Right.
Because the Native Americans didn't believe that you could own the land. The land belonged to Great Spirit.
Right.
And so, yes, it included very much exploring the notion of the gift. That's why they call them Indian givers, because people thought they had been given the land, but then Native Americans thought, but no one can be given the land. And so it looked as if they were trying to take it back.
Right.
And that looked like what they called an Indian giver, someone who betrayed a deal.
I had no idea that's where that phrase came from.
Yeah.
Makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So just so much stuff. So the day begins. And what's the date of Sinterklass here?
December 3rd.
December 3rd. And that's a Saturday?
Yes.
And when is the first official event of that day?
Well, this year it's going to be a kind of secret.
Oh, good.
Because I'm going to tell you about it, and the people who are fortunate enough to remember, or they just happen to be there when it happens, they'll get to see something special. So what's happening this year at Sinterklaas is the forest is coming in to talk to the children.
Oh, nice.
And talk about the situation with forests, our local forests. I'm not sure if you know this, but there's a great mourning in the town of Rhinebeck right now because 35 of our big trees were cut down, and the village looks very different because of that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that will happen at Sinterklaas is the trees are going to tell us about what that felt like to have those trees cut down, and there's going to be a moment of mourning for those trees, and then a kind of celebration of the new trees that have been planted. So the first thing that's going to happen is the porcupine, who you probably don't know this, but porcupines live in trees.
Uh-huh.
So the porcupine is going to come down out of his tree, and he's going to lead the forest into town. So they're going to begin at near the Episcopal Church.
Okay.
And we've made 8 beautiful tree puppets. They'll be accompanied by a Ukrainian chorus of fall trees. So there'll be 16 trees in the entourage, the giant porcupine, and Hansel and Gretel, who'll be the hosts of the day. And they're going to come into town. They're going to come into the village to talk to the children.
And where will that happen? In one central location where everybody
They'll walk from around the Episcopal Church to the Beekman Arms.
Okay. Just sort of talking to the kids who are gathered on the parade route, such as it is.
Whoever sees them, it's a procession.
Yeah.
And so whoever sees them, but you can't just say, oh, the trees are coming into town, unless the trees actually walk into town. So that was the first thing. How are the trees going to walk into town? So I did a lot of research. I read 5 or 6 books on trees, and I found out the trees walk. The trees actually move. They don't necessarily stay in one place. And so the idea for the walking trees was created.
Well, I love that. And they have a script, I'm guessing. The actors and actresses who are playing the trees have a script?
Yes, the trees are dancers. Leanne Kowalski is choreographing the dancing trees. The Ukrainian singers that are as the fall trees are singing very particular songs of mourning for the trees that were taken down. And Hansel and Gretel are going to sing a song. They are 2 bard opera singers, these 2 beautiful young women, a mezzo and a soprano, because Hansel and Gretel in the Engelbert Humperdinck opera are played by 2 girls, a mezzo and a soprano. And they're going to sing the prayer, what's called the prayer, from that opera. And it's very famous. I mean, lots of people know, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. 200 angels guard my feet. Except the difference is going to be this year, instead of them singing about being afraid in the forest, they're going to realize that the forest is crucial to their existence, to life on earth. And they're going to understand that the forest is a protector of their lives and not something to be afraid of. And during the course of the song, we've rewritten all the words. The words were rewritten by the polar bear, who's one of the characters who appears at Sinterklass, which is another part of the story. I made up all these characters. So they're going to sing that beautiful prayer, but with the words teaching the children about how the forest protects them and how they have to be aware of that and take care of the forest. And so at the end of the song, there's a pledge for the children to take care of the forest into the future.
I just love it all so much. And what time will that kick off?
Well, the first performance they're going to walk into town probably around 11:20. The opening ceremony is at noon. Mm-hmm. So the trees, Hansel and Gretel, will appear, and the chorus, they'll all appear in the opening ceremony. But that's where a lot of things happen, because another part of the story is when I brought the Sinterklaas back, one of my biggest concerns is that there were a few people had to accept that they were willing to have it come back. So one were the merchants, because they're giving up a Saturday at the most important time of the year for them. They had to agree that it was okay for us to take away that time from them. So I had meetings with all the merchants in which I asked them, is this okay to do? The other important aspect of this for me was the Jewish community had to be part of this. They always were in a little way, but things had changed a lot since after 9/11. Mm-hmm. And so I really had to know the Jewish community was behind it. So I held a series of meetings with Jonathan Kliegler, Rabbi Romer, my friend John Kalish, who works for NPR, who knows a lot about Jewish tradition, the Vanivers, a few other people. Uh-huh. And we were trying to figure out, well, how do we deal with this? How do we make this work? And Rabbi Romer said at the end of the meeting, she said, I just wish there was some symbol that we could all get around that wasn't loaded, that wasn't already, whatever. I went home, and I do my best work when I'm asleep. So I fell asleep and I had a dream, and I dreamed the stars. So the story of the stars is, so I woke up in the morning and I called Yael and I said, here's my idea. We create these stars. So the children make their crowns and branches, but the stars are for the adults. And the story is that we make a star that is non-denominational, just comes from nowhere in a way, except that's not true. The stars come from the celestial beings. So at the same time the star was created, so were the Snow King and Queen, who dwell among the Pleiades. So now the next part of the story develops, right? Because the parade is led by the Pleiades, the 7 sisters, who are the elder women in the community. So what happens is that the celestial beings, the Snow King and Queen, every year bring the first star going through the Pleiades, who kind of curate the star. They bring that star down to the community, and then there's the holders of the flame. So every year, there's a family that's chosen to hold the season of Sinterklaas, to hold that star throughout the season, and to hold that energy of the whole world being involved in this celebration. And the first thing that happens in the opening ceremony is the star is passed from the family from the year before to the new family that's going to hold it. And we've been doing this since the beginning. And all of the families who've done it in the past have to show up, and we dress them in funny capes. It's like a whole very elaborate ceremony that happens that passes the star from the celestial realms down to Earth, to our community, to hold it.
Right.
But then the real story of what happens with the star is, so all the adults have the stars. So they bring them to the pageant. So at the end of the parade, there's a pageant, which happens on a beautiful stage, which Richard Prowse has been creating since the beginning of time. And this year, it's exquisite. And what happens, the very first thing that happens is that all the adults are told that we have to honor the children. There's a poem, a whole script that I wrote many years ago. It's exactly the same after 40 years, pretty much. And so all the adults are told that they have to bow down on one knee, and they hold the stars at the children's waist level. So for that moment, the whole community is bowed down, and the children are the tallest people in the community, and they look out on a sea of stars.
I love that so much.
Stars. And we cheer the children, hip, hip, hooray. And then all the adults are told to stand and hold the stars over their heads. And at that moment, the whole community is under this canopy of stars.
So beautiful.
When I told Yael this, she said, "That's it."
That's so good. So you said you wrote this poem to the children like 40 years ago, and it hasn't changed since then.
No.
What percentage of Sinterklaas that we're going to see on Saturday, December 4th? 3rd. What percentage of that was there 40 years ago?
All of it. The stars weren't there. But
you've certainly, over the years, you've
children.
dropped some out and you've pulled new stuff in. No, it's pretty much as it was.
We honor all of the elements. We honor the native people. We honor all the people who've come afterwards.
But it's evolved some.
And the main thing that changes in the ceremony every year is the piece about the honored animal. Because the other thing is that my friend Gigi Alvarez every year channels the honored animal.
Oh, nice.
So she channels the honored animal, and she writes a blessing. And that blessing is read at the pageant.
And she's done that already?
Yes, it's written.
It's written.
Yeah. And this year we chose the porcupine because since COVID, everybody is just so prickly. And it really is true. And but there's a really interesting irony to it all because I chose the porcupine because everybody's so prickly. And then I started to research it, and I started to look into Native tradition. And astonishingly, the porcupine is the symbol for innocence. It's the it's the symbol for the child. It's the symbol for play. So porcupines only raise their quills and become disagreeable when someone attacks them. Otherwise, they're playful creatures. You can feed them by hand. You can touch their noses.
Right.
But if you threaten them, then up go the quills. Right. So this year, the overall theme is embrace the porcupine. And so that's what I've been doing. I have been embracing all the porcupines that I come up against. I mean, in like a super joyful way. I mean, like, oh, here's a really difficult person. How can we play with them? How can we find a way to play with them?
Right.
And so that's sort of been the task of this year for me.
bet. And what a Herculean task that must be. One of the things, like the gates in Central Park, Christo and Jean-Claude, who did that, and all these things, they wrapped Reichstag. Always I'm like, okay, that's nice, but holy crap, wrangling the bureaucracy to get that done must really be something. And I imagine that's a big part of your job, embracing the porcupine of the bureaucracy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that changes over the years. I mean, when I first started it, it was, people were like, who is this person? She's weird looking. She has frizzy hair. She's kind of odd. And nobody really trusted me. It was very difficult, to sort of make things happen. But then over the years, it takes years, many years. Over the years, it started to change. Right now, the village government and love Sinterklaas, and they're extremely easy to work with. But it's not as easy with DOT and the Department of Health, for example.
Right. And is it a bad day for the local merchants?
No.
They do poorly? I would guess the opposite.
No, they do very well. Now, Sinterklaas is... I created it for this community. I did not create it for the tourists. I did not create it for the big world. I created it for this community. But I'm not unfortunate. It depends on your point of view. But now it's kind of world famous, I would have to say.
Yeah, it's nice.
So now many, many people come from many, many places to be a part of it, including Holland. People come from Holland to be a part of it.
It's super popular. I saw on the website you auction off, or you have a raffle for a parking space.
Yes, indeed, because parking is really hard in town. That's one of the problems.
Yeah.
And we raffle off a parking place.
And so where do people park?
Everywhere.
I mean,
they park all the way as far away as the fairgrounds.
Are there shuttle buses from the fairground?
No, there are no shuttle buses because we can't afford them. I mean, that's another whole aspect of Sinterklaas, which is I have to raise all the money to do it.
Right.
So
when you said there had been in Rhinebeck a craft fair and it went away, and somebody asked you to come up with an idea, and you reached out to the community and you came up with this. Who asked you? Who were those people? And what had you done prior to this that made them think, oh, Jeanne would be a good person to ask?
Well, I had done Let the River Connect Us, which was the project in the school where we renegotiated the sale of the land, between the children. So people knew about that. I made that for the tercentenary of Rhinebeck, the 300th anniversary of Rhinebeck. But at the time, I was already running the Halloween parade. I've been doing that for 42 years. And,
Gotcha.
And I had done a lot of different kinds of events around, but I was also doing the Statue of Liberty celebration at that time, and so people knew who I was.
And by the Halloween parade, you mean the Halloween parade, the Greenwich City Village Halloween parade, which were you there at the founding of that? You worked with Lee?
Ralph Lee created the Halloween parade. No, I came in at about the 7th year, in the sense of working with him.
Right.
Every year, I used to do what was called the Harvest Pageant. And this is a whole story about how I started doing this work. Because I was a medievalist, yes, it's true. But I was going to teach English literature. That was the plan. I was an English major with medieval studies as my major. But I went on an interesting trip with my friend Gigi many, many years ago. We decided to trace her ancestry. She's from Spain. And we wound up going to Morocco as part of our trip. And in Morocco, I wound up drinking water out of a rusty tin can with the Berbers in the Sahara Desert. And when I did that, I got hepatitis.
Oh, boy.
So I came home and I got very sick, and I was like, oh, my God, this is horrible. I mean, I wasn't really suicidal, but I was like, oh, this is so awful. And my friend Doug Boz, who is one of the greatest photographers of Sinterklaas, he said to me, look, before you do anything crazy, he said, go down and see this guy who I see down in Fishkill named Dr. Fish. So I went down to Dr. Fish, and Dr. Fish said, look, don't do anything. Give me 6 months. So I thought, well, I'm going to be around for 6 months. I may as well do something. And what I did was I created my first theater piece, and we called it a pageant because my friend Rick Aldrich, where I live at Rokeby, which is an unusual place to live, and we have 600 acres there, so we did this on Rokeby. Rick said, don't call it a theater piece. Local people won't come. Call it a pageant, and they'll think there'll be beautiful girls in bathing suits. And so we called it Harvest Pageant. And that pageant was very much like the model for everything I've done since, which is it just involved local people. There were some professional artists, so that it was a homemade thing, but it had a quality to it. Because everything has to have a high quality. It's not community theater. It's not funky. Unless it's intentional funky, it's all operating at a pretty high level. And so it was the first thing I did. And the minute I did it, I knew what my life was about. And I never looked back.
And how old were you?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. While you're thinking, you brought some cocktails. Let's have
28.
some cocktails. 28.
Yeah, that'll make me forget the past.
All right. What did you bring?
I brought Cosmos, of course, because they come from the cosmos. They were given to me by the Snow King and Queen.
Fabulous. Well, will you pour some? You want me to pour?
I can try.
Yeah.
I gave you a much bigger glass.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a much larger person.
I hope it's good. It
looks good so far. Just the right color.
They're supposed to be pale pink. I'm not going to have quite as much as you.
Oh, good.
Already told too much of the truth.
No, you didn't. Here, cheers. Jeanne, thank you so much for being here. And congratulations on finding this path when you were 28. And really, it seems like you're enjoying it.
I love it. I don't think there's a day go by that I don't find it utterly astonishing that there's food in the refrigerator. I have a roof over my head. I have clothes to wear. I raised a child, and I did all of it telling stories.
And you said your child had been ill. They're okay now?
Yeah, he's fine. He got cancer when he was 7, and he's fine now. He survived, and he had a kidney transplant when he was 22, and he is now a 32-year-old, rather nice boy who is going to supply the sound system for the opening ceremony.
Nice. And where will that be? In Foster's parking lot?
No, in the Beekman Arms.
Okay.
That's where all the characters are introduced. The polar bear comes. The purpose of the polar bear is the children sing to him. When the children sing to him, he dances. So it teaches children the power of art to transform the world. We can turn a wild beast into a dancing bear if we sing to it. And then there's Mother Holly, who... she brings all of the children into the clan of the honored animal that year. And she's with a storytelling house. And that house has a door. And the children get to... Another thing that's very important to me in Sinterklaas is that there are intimate person-to-person moments all day long.
Right.
It's not about the crowd. It's really about those intimate moments where you get to touch something or you get to hold something yourself.
Or connect with the person.
Exactly.
Right.
So what happens here is they get to open the door of the storytelling house, and in there is the honored animal.
And where will that be, the storytelling house?
The storytelling house goes around town all afternoon.
Okay.
And we discovered the other day, the woman who made it, Terry O'Keefe, she looked at the bottom of it and she saw that she had made it in 2010. And she said, do you realize how many children have opened that door? It's usually around 1,000 children a year. That means that 12,000 children have opened that door and gotten what I'm about to give you so that you can join the clan.
Oh, thank you.
The porcupine.
Oh, fabulous.
Your official button.
The Sinterklaas 2022 button.
Yes.
And are those for sale somewhere around town?
No. Nothing. Very few things are for sale.
Well, the stars are, right?
This is a free event.
And they serve a good cause.
The stars help to raise money for the event. We also make 100 puppets of the honored animal. My friend Martha Tobias, who's been very, very involved this year, much to my breathtaking admiration. She's made a lot of them. My friend Sarah Bissonette has made a bunch of them, and others in the community are making porcupine puppets. We sell them for the benefit of the event, but the event is free, and everything that's given away is free.
And the stars are also, they feed a family? Is it by a star feed a family?
By a star feed a family. So every star, a certain amount of money of the star is given to food insecurity in the community. And this year, actually, Rosenberg Responds gave us a grant to re-grant for food insecurity. So we're going to be also matching, in part, that grant. And then we're going to be giving money to the food banks in the community.
Nice.
That's always been a part of Sinterklaas. It was a very early poem about bring a bell to ring and a can of food or a piece of new clothing for the community, for the poor. So that's always been a part of it. And Rosenberg Responds recognized that, particularly during COVID. And we had a relationship. And they've disbanded now. But Sinterklaas is going to take on that role and support the food pantries in the community.
It's just amazing. A beautiful, poetic event.
Well, the idea is to feed the soul and to feed the body. That's the idea, right? That's what we're doing.
Solid idea.
And then the other character is the pocket lady. And I've brought you a pocket lady prize again, this is a thing that's really interesting. So a lot of this is like an exercise in trust, right? Where the community does things with the children that allows them to trust. Yeah. The Grumpuses are part of trust because the Grumpuses are played by community leaders. But they're dressed as these kind of scary characters. There's no flinching away from the reality of the world. There are scary things in the world that go bump in the night. They're there. But in our incarnation of the Grumpuses, they're candy men. They're ones who give candy to the children. Right. But they're a little edgy. You got to decide, who is this person? Can I trust them? Why should I trust them? And that's the role of the Grumpus, is to figure out the way in which, dressed as a somewhat scary character, you can convey to the children that you come from love, and so they're not afraid of you. So the pocket lady is the same. She has her coat, which has all the pockets in it that the children can have. But to get them, one by one, they have to go inside her cape and pick a pocket in private by themselves. And they get to decide which one they want.
I'm not sure I've seen the pocket lady before.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
She's wonderful. She gives away over 1,200 prizes every year. So here is yours. They come in little bags, and they always have the porcupine stamped on them. And these are put together by Leela Peg. And this year, they're really weird.
Sort of a porcupine alien.
Yes, indeed. So there are 15 different porcupine creatures. So the other thing too is that we make things in such a quantity that no child is likely to get the same thing as his brother or his best friend.
Right.
So that's one of the things that happens, is the pocket lady gives away these prizes.
So what is the operating budget for Sinterklaas?
I don't discuss that.
You don't? Okay. But it's got to be, a fair amount. I know there's lots of volunteer work, which is a wonderful way to involve the community. But still,
I'm a volunteer. None of the staff is paid. Everyone is a volunteer who works on Sinterklaas.
Really? Yeah. I assumed you were getting paid.
Oh, gosh, no.
Well,
this is my gift to the community. This is what I do for my community. Amazing. This is my favorite thing I do all year.
and the village Halloween parade, I assume.
Well, I'm paid to do that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Definitely. I'm paid to do that. But no, Sinterklaas has always been just a gift.
What a phenomenal gift. What a wonderful gift. And how did you came to Bard? Is that how you came to be in this area?
Yeah, I came as a faculty wife to Bard when I was 18 years old. I was a faculty wife at 18. So I came as a faculty wife at Bard, and then I went to Bard. I was a John Bard scholar. I graduated from Bard. Yeah.
And did you go away somewhere and then come back, or?
Oh, lots of things happened, but no, I never went away. I've lived on River Road for the past 18, I'm almost 70, I'm 77, so almost 60 years I've lived on River Road.
Oh my goodness, at the Rokeby estate?
No, I've only lived at Rokeby for 52 years.
Oh, only, yeah.
Yeah. Before that, I lived in the Whaleback Inn, and then I lived at Bard for many years. Then I moved to a house in Barrytown, and then I moved to Rokeby 52 years ago.
And how did you come to live in Rokeby? You said you knew Aldrich.
Ice boating.
Ice boating.
Yeah. So the way I first came to Rokeby was in a canoe. I came by water. A good friend of mine, we went on a canoeing trip on the river. We quickly learned through experience that the Native American name for the Hudson River is the Mannahatta, which means river that flows in two directions. So what happened was we started out, we had a hard time rowing against the tide because the Hudson River is tidal. That's why it goes in two directions. And we parked our canoe. We couldn't go any further. We camped on an island, which it turned out is the island of Rokeby's Island. And so we put our canoe, we docked it, we slept there, and in the morning we got up and the canoe was missing. Oh my God, where's the canoe? What do? We had no idea. So we can't get onto the water to go home. So we start walking up the trail at Rokeby to what turned out to be the mansion. Along the way, I encountered Ricky's sister and her husband who were speaking French. So my first conversation at Rokeby was in French. And we walked up and we found Ricky. And Ricky said, well, of course your canoe left in the night. The river is tidal. Your canoe's on the other side of the island. So we walked down again to the river, and sure enough, there was the canoe on the other side of the island. But I had seen Rokeby and I had met Ricky. And so one of the things he told me about is that they did ice boating at Rokeby. And I'm a sailor, and I was fascinated by that. So the very next season, which was soon because this happened in the fall, I got hooked up with Ricky and ice boating. So it was really ice boating that really got me involved with Rokeby. And then ultimately, Ricky's wife became my best friend. And she was an artist, a Polish artist, and she began doing paintings for all the events I was doing and things I was creating. And so we started working together, and that's part of why Rokeby became so much a part. I used to do 10 or 11 events a year at Rokeby.
What a blast.
Yeah, it was great.
I wish I could have seen them. Are any of them been videotaped and edited and up on YouTube?
So, no, because another thing that I believed when I started doing things, I had a theory of something called what I called the set as dancer. I love dance because it's ephemeral. You can never see it again. You have to watch it in the second. So I used to actually destroy my sets as they unfolded. So they would come apart, they would be burned, they would be taken apart. So there would be no trace. It was the notion of leave no trace. I also didn't like when video came in. I didn't like it because it flattened the image. But what I really wanted was for people to have it in their memories, because what people remember is so much richer than anything you can capture on film, or especially video, which is what it started with video. And so I often would not let people take pictures or video any of the work. However, Anya, being a wonderful artist, used to paint plates with all of the events in it. So I have hundreds of plates that Anya painted of
commemorating
all the different events.
That's amazing.
From memory.
And there's the movie somewhere I can only see the trailer for it called The 12-Foot Tall Rabbits of Rokeby Farm.
Oh, yes, indeed. That was made during the Katrina year when
That sounds intriguing, and
story.
I guess sort of a record of one of these events.
That was a record of an event that didn't happen.
Oh,
because that was the only time the Halloween parade has ever been. Well, it was also canceled for COVID, but it was canceled because of Katrina, because of Hurricane Sandy. Actually, those two things loomed large in the Halloween parade's life. But Hurricane Sandy, all of Lower Manhattan flooded, and we had to call the parade off.
Right.
And so that was all about how Sandy was coming and we couldn't do the parade and everything. That was what that was about. And then the year that Halloween was canceled, we made I decided I didn't want to do a Zoom thing. They were so depressing that everything I was seeing. So what we did was oh my gosh, I can hardly remember the name of it. The first ever world premiere intergalactic miniature Halloween parade. And instead of having the parade, I had all these artists I knew who were puppeteers who were out of work. They were totally depressed. And so I commissioned everybody to make a puppet. And Richard Prowse created a backdrop of Manhattan, going from the Statue of Liberty all the way to the Apollo Theater and the cloisters. And we created in his studio a puppet Halloween parade. And we recorded that, and that's what we did during COVID. And then during COVID for Sinterklass.
Can I see that somewhere? That sounds
you
really...
can see it on YouTube.
Okay. What's it called? Yeah. Puppet Halloween Parade?
World's greatest first ever intergalactic. I can't even remember how to say it anymore. Miniature Halloween Parade. You can look up New York City miniature Halloween parade. You can see it. And then that year during COVID, we also created a movie for Sinterklass as well, about the frog who was going to be the honored animal, but of course it was called off, and so he couldn't come. And so we made up a whole story about how the frog and all the honored animals brought the stars into town, and we promised the children that Sinterklaas would come back the following year, and it did. And during that year, Froggy fell in love with Miss Mousy, and they got married at Sinterklaas last year. And the mayor and his wife, they renewed their vows on what was actually, the reason we did it was that the mayor told me there were only 2 days in his life where he felt like he'd throw up. One was his wedding day, and one was Sinterklaas. And so I said to him, well, why don't we just combine them? And you can do both on one day. And so they did. They upped their vows last year publicly as part of Sinterklaas.
That's Gary Bassett?
Yeah.
That's so sweet.
And Brenda. It was wonderful. They dressed as Miss Mousy and Froggy. Susie Morris makes all the really elaborate costumes for Sinterklaas. And I found a drawing that I really love that I was using as the model for the puppets that were made of Froggy and Miss Mousy. And because there's always a giant puppet made of the honored animal. And she actually made costumes for them that were exactly like the picture. And so they looked just like, the puppets looked just like the drawing that I worked with.
And these giant puppets on long rods and poles have been a part of almost all of your productions and pageants over the years.
Well, the reason partly is that when I started, I was also involved with the Bread and Puppet Theater many, many years ago. Puppetry was a part of things. And I knew Ralph Lee, who started the parade, and puppets were a part of the parade. So I continued that tradition when I took it over from him. And part of the beauty of the story is my friend Gigi and my friend Anya, we made all the puppets for years in workshop at my house at Rokeby. The people who make the puppets now, Alex and Sophia, they grew up as children in the atmosphere of building these puppets. Sophia was in the Halloween parade, I think, first when she was 12. Alex was a local boy who went to Red Hook, and he knew about the puppets. And so the two of them grew up on the puppets that Anya and Gigi and I made. When they got old enough, they became the puppeteers. And so that's like another sort of like long tradition. I mean, Alex is 20 years younger than I am. I've known him since he was 14. I've known Sophia since she was born. So they grew up in this atmosphere of us building these puppets. And then when their moment came to choose their careers, that's what they decided they wanted to do. So they now make all the puppets.
Amazing.
It is. It's wonderful.
So sweet. And the puppets are every year just amazing.
Yes.
They're so ridiculously beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
And the dancers who operate them.
Yeah. They're all local people who volunteer to do all of it.
So how many people will take part in this year?
You mean the parade?
Yeah, performers, puppeteers,
Oh.
singers, dancers,
Just in the parade.
Well,
Probably.
and the creation of art for it.
Probably there, like in the parade, there are probably 600 people, maybe 600.
And the people volunteering at the crowns and branches place,
Well, if you count everybody who works on the project, I think somebody made me do this the other day. I think there are close to 950 people who work on it in the end.
Amazing. What a huge feat of organization.
Yeah. Well, we're lucky we live in a very creative community where there are a lot of people who want to do things like this.
Yeah.
People like Martha and Richard, Pat Sexton, Leela Peg, Elena Erber, who does all of our graphics and created the look of Sinterklaas, Anya, Alex, and Sophia. I mean, it's just an extraordinary group of people. There are probably like 15 of us who work on it all year round. Lindy Wright, who makes the swap. That's an incredible fundraiser that she does for us. We do a clothing swap.
Okay.
Lindy is an amazing person who worked as head of community relations for Saks for years, and she's a fashionista, and she does that as her contribution to raising money for Sinterklaas.
That's great. And where does that happen? Has that happened already?
It's happened at different places over time. And then the other thing is the churches are involved. The restaurants are involved. The Beak is involved. I mean, the Beak, goes back to the original, times of the Dutch in Rhinebeck.
Right.
And the Bantas he was head of the Holland Society. They're direct descendants from the Dutch who came here.
Right. You say that the churches and the synagogues, I mean, it's not just sort of non-denominational. It seems sort of multi-denominational.
Everyone's involved. That's part of
And there's a thing
deal.
called the Havdalah.
The Havdalah. So that was another thing where I wanted to find a place for Yael to be able to do something. So one of the other things that's interesting about Sinterklaas is it happens in a time out of time. So it begins after the Havdalah, which is the end of the Jewish Sabbath, and it begins after that, and then it ends before the beginning of the Christian Sabbath. So it happens in a time out of time when everyone can come together, so that it's not one thing or the other. It's everyone together.
Once again, I'm so impressed with the poetry, the thoughtful poetry that you brought to all of this.
That's the story.
It's just lovely.
That's my job.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this gift to the community.
The only job I wish I had to do.
The only job you wish you had to do?
Yes, I wish I didn't have to raise money and deal with the health department and DOT and insurance and all the other ins and outs of working in 15 different spaces. And
do you have sort of like expert administrative assistants, like a lawyer who helps you out with that stuff, and a government official? I mean,
everyone helps.
Everyone, yeah.
Everyone helps. Everybody helps. I think the only thing I do alone is I sleep alone.
Over there in Rokeby.
Yeah.
So you do the village Halloween parade, you do this. What other events do you do in a typical year?
Well, these days, I used to do 12 or 14 events a year, but when my son got cancer, I had to be a cancer mom for a little bit of time. And so I started cutting back a little bit after Jordy got sick. But I do those two events. One of the ways in which I organize Sinterklass is that every month I create a special event for all the people who work on it. The 15 key, going up to maybe 30 key people who work on it. So I have to do something for them because they're all doing these wonderful jobs, as part of Sinterklass. So I create these special events, dinners, and little special events that keeps me kind of going, is making up the stories for what those are going to be about. During COVID, we sort of lost that pace, but we're back on it again. So I just create those special events. That's a lot. I do things at Rokeby. I make little concerts and things, but I'm not doing any. Well, I did do the walkway over the Hudson. I did the opening of the walkway over the Hudson. Yeah, I did that. But that was in 2009. So that was like the last major event that I did. Jordy at that time was just about to go into the kidney transplant, I think. I don't remember. But that kind of stopped my ability to do that much work, to take on that much. So now I work as a consultant, but the Halloween parade and Sinterklaas take an enormous amount of time. I've been working 9 in the morning until 2 in the morning since August 10th.
You guys.
Yeah. No, they take a huge amount of time. And it isn't about, it's not that I'm not efficient. It's just that that's the amount of time it takes. There's
so many elements, and they all seem so beautifully and poetically brought together, from your mind to the execution on the streets of Rhinebeck. And guess what? We're out of time.
Bye.
Bye.
I got to go back to work.
Yeah, I'll bet. Thank you so much for this gift to our community. And thanks for coming here and talking about it. This has been Jeanne Fleming on Correct Me If I'm Norm. Everybody have a happy Friday. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.